Hello. We are going to deal with the granules today. Hello. Today we are going to deal with the granules first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Second we are not going to deal. Second Dr. Suresh has already taken. Therefore, the rest of the granules we are going to discuss today. And when you come back, practice classes will start. Therefore, the granules are very important. They take the origin from the cell bodies. They take the origin from the brain. The granules origin, the red 12 pairs, they take the origin from brain. Now coming to the first granule now, it is the olfactory now, as you all know. It's an olfactory. The granule starts from the epithelium, olfactory epithelium. In the nose, it starts from the olfactory epithelium. Its unique feature is that it's open to the nerve endings are open to the environmental. Therefore, environmental opening the nerve endings. And other special features of this olfactory nerve is that it doesn't go to the thalamus, rather nerves travels the thalamus, and also it doesn't have any connection with the neocortex. Therefore, these are the unique features. It is as a direct communication with the environment, atmosphere. It doesn't pass through the thalamus, and it doesn't have any connection with the neocortex. These are some unique features of this. And it starts in the olfactory epithelium, the first order neurons. These are bipolar cells. Bipolar cells, they start in the olfactory epithelium. They pierce the cribriform plate where the olfactory fossa of the ethmoid bone, and then they land into the olfactory bulb, and from here the second order neurons takes place, and then the second order neurons ends in the pyriform lobe, in the pre-pyriform fossa, pre-pyriform area and pre-amygdaloid area of the pyriform lobe. Therefore, the pathway is clear. Starting from the olfactory epithelium, this nerve endings are in direct communication with the atmosphere, and from there they pierce the cribriform plate where the olfactory fossa of the ethmoid bone. Therefore, they land into the olfactory bulb. Second order neurons arise, and then in the pyriform lobe, in the pre-amygdaloid and pre-pyriform areas. Therefore, this is the root, and the unique features are it doesn't cross the thalamus, and it doesn't have any connections with the neocortex. Therefore, these are some unique features. Then, any derailment in the pathway, anything wrong in the pathway, any disease, infection, or injury, or anything in the pathway may cause deviations in the smell. We have again the anosmia, complete absence of smell, hyposmia. This is decreased sense of smell, and we also have this alteration. There may be a slight parasmia, slight alterations. The anosmia complete absence, hyposmia decreased, parasmia is the alteration. A slight change may be there in the smell. And this change of smell also is an important diagnostic factor. And then this substance commonly used are clove oil and garlic, clove oil, and this cinnamon and all we can use. And this each nostril is tested separately. Here we are seeing the figure. We have to close the one nostril. Yeah, one nostril has been closed with a finger, and we are bringing close to this whether it is a clove oil or cinnamon or garlic. And therefore, anything can be can be pungent smell. They can be patient should identify separately each nostril. And sometimes there's a commercially available oils also in the market, to which the patient is not used. But this smells we are acclimatized to these smells that even if he doesn't smell, he may say that I'm smelling. Therefore, this commercially available oils can also be used because the patient is not acclimatized with that smell. We can identify correctly. Therefore, each nostril is tested separately, each nostril. And sometimes we get smell that is fatigue of the smell. That is suppose we are used to this odorous smell for a long time. You get used to it. You don't feel it. Therefore, it is called a fatigue. Fatigue. It's landing into a fatigue. This is not able to smell properly because for years together he has been fatigued. Therefore, each nostril you have to test separately. The commonly used clove oil, cinnamon, and garlic. And therefore, the pathway you have to, you may be asked the pathway also. The pathway also, you have to, and each nostril, remember, separately you have to test. This is the first cranial nerve. Now let's go to the second cranial nerve. Second is, I'm not even sorry, the third, fourth, and sixth cranial nerves. The third, fourth, and sixth cranial nerves. Oculomotor, trachea, and abdomen. This three cranial nerves we are dealing together because they supply the extraocular muscle movement. The extraocular movement of the muscles, eye muscles. These 3, 4, 6, they combinedly they play a role in the movement of the muscles.
అట్లనే ఎక్కడ లేదు కదా మంచి ఛార్జింగ్ అని పెట్టమ్మా
Therefore, these 3, 4, and 6 muscles we are testing together for the movement. These 6 ocular muscles are there. 6 ocular muscles are there.
అక్కడ ఎక్కిందండి అక్కడ పెట్టేది
So I'm hearing some background. This thing, somebody is talking in the background. Please make it mute. Mute this thing system. I'm hearing background talk. It's disturbing. Please make it mute. I'll stop the class here if you don't mute it.
Hello? Yeah. నేను రూమ్లోనే లేదు
ఇప్పుడు ఏముండదు మేడం. కాదు మేడం, ఏంటంటే ఇక్కడ అంటే ఏంటంటే పార్టిసిపెంట్స్ ని మ్యూట్ అలాంటి మేబీ ఎప్పుడో సంథింగ్ ఏదో అయ్యింది మేడం, అందుకంటే ఏం లేదు ఉండదు.
Now, clinical examination of third, fourth, and sixth cranial nerves. We are combining all these nerves because they are supplying the extraocular muscles, and the movements are based on the intactness of these nerves. The mainly 6 extraocular muscles, and this adduction, abduction, upward elevation, depression, and the lateral rotation movements. All these movements are brought about by this 3, 4, and 6 muscles. The oculomotor nerve supplies all the muscles, all this except lateral rectus and superior oblique. Lateral rectus, therefore, oculomotor nerve, with oculomotor nerve, lateral rectus movement is not possible. And since it's not supplying the superior oblique, therefore, depression of the medially deviated eye is also not possible. Therefore, 2 movements are not possible with the third cranial nerve. Depression of the medially deviated eye and the lateral movements of the eye are not possible with the third cranial nerve. Therefore, all the other movements are possible with third cranial nerve, whereas the lateral rectus is supplied by the 6th cranial nerve. Lateral rectus. Therefore, lateral movements are brought about by this efficient nerve, 6th cranial nerve, and trochlea, 4th cranial nerve, superior oblique. Therefore, the movements of downward depression of the medially deviated eye. Depression of the medially deviated eye is brought about by the 4th cranial nerve. Therefore, all the 6 ocular muscles are supplied by the 3rd cranial nerve, except lateral rectus and superior oblique. Lateral rectus by 6th and superior oblique by 4th. Therefore, the lateral movements are not possible with 3rd cranial nerve, and also depression of the medially deviated eye is also not possible with the 3rd cranial nerve. Therefore, this is this thing. Now, the 3rd cranial nerve, in addition to this, it also performs the function of direct and indirect light reflex, accommodation reflex. All these things are also brought about by 3rd cranial nerve. Therefore, while examining 3rd cranial nerve, we have to examine the direct and indirect light reflex, accommodation reflex, and movements of the eye. And therefore, the first movements of the eye. Here, movements of the eye. You have to sit in front of the patient. Here, the movements of the eye, at least 6 feet distance should be there. The head should be kept still, and the eye should be this. He should gaze only at your fingers. His eye should be gazing at it. He should not move his head. It should be fixed. His eyes should gaze your fingers. And the patient here, the fingers are moved in an upper direction, in a downward direction, in a medial and a lateral direction. Therefore, the movements of adduction here, adduction, abduction, that is the medial movement, lateral movement, upward movements, and downward movements, and lateral rotation and medial rotation. All movements are tested. This is how you make the sit at the same height. Height should be same, head should be fixed, and you should follow the movements of the fingers only with the eyes. Movements of the fingers with the eyes. First examine one eye and then close the other eye, close the other eye and examine one eye, then close the other eye and examine this side. Head should be still and he should follow, the eye should follow only the finger. With the eyes, I should follow only the fingers. And then the inspector. So then we have to test separately. After we have tested the moments, 3, 4, 6 moments, we have to test separately for the other functions of the third cranial nerve. The other functions of the, we have to see the pupil, whether the pupils are irregular shape or regular shape, the pupils are equal on both sides, and whether the patient is having any nystagmus, squint, or ptosis. You have to examine, see whether the patient is having any ptosis, that is drooping of the eyelid, squint. The person is unable to focus, both eyes are unable to focus on a single point. That's the squint. Both eyes cannot focus on a single point simultaneously. That's a squint. Drooping of the eyelids, drooping of the eyelids, ptosis, nystagmus. Without this thing, uncontrollable movement of the eyeballs, nystagmus. Uncontrollable movement of the eyeball, automatically, that is called nystagmus. Therefore, first you see third, fourth, and fifth cranial nerves, movements of the extraocular muscles, and you have to be clear which muscles supply what and what is the function of the fourth and sixth cranial nerve, all these things. And what are the various movements? Adduction, abduction, upward movement of the head, downward depression, elevation, and medial and lateral rotation. After this, you go in for the third cranial nerve. You examine for ptosis, nystagmus, and squint. These three things, you have to see whether the patient is having these three things. You have to, ptosis. You have to see whether the ptosis is both present in both eyes, that is unilateral or bilateral. All these things are present unilateral or bilateral, whether it is continuously then or sometimes it's happening. All these things. And whether there's any exophthalmos, protrusion of eyeball. You have to see any tortuous vessels in the conjunctiva. Usually conjunctiva should be white without any tortuous vessel. Here the vessels are congested. Usually we don't see so much congestion in the conjunctiva. Therefore we have to see whether it is any exophthalmos or anophthalmos. This is eyeballs are inside. That is, it is a hollow-like thing. The conjunctiva, whether there is any blood vessels or any subconjunctival hemorrhages, corneal rings. And then you have to see the size of the pupil. The size of the pupil, whether it's equal on both sides, I think the irregularity is there. All these things you have to see. Ptosis, here we see the mild ptosis. Here we see mild ptosis. Here moderate ptosis. Here the severe ptosis. See here, drooping of the upper eyelid. Mild. Moderate. Drooping of the upper eyelid. What are the causes? The various causes acquired. The acquired are some neurogenic acquired causes may be there. Neurogenic Turner syndrome. In this, it's normally it is drooping in nature, but it can be raised voluntarily if you want. You can raise. Third nerve palsy. Third nerve palsy. There may be a wrinkling of forehead, and here ptosis may be seen. It may be a myogenic. mitochondrial, oculopharyngeal muscular dystrophy, myotonic dystrophy, or neuromuscular junction, myasthenia gravis. Yeah, fluctuating doses, myasthenia gravis. Doses is not continuous, the doses is drooping of phalanx. And these are the variants: acquired neurogenic, myogenic, neuromuscular junction causes myasthenia gravis, myogenic muscle defects, mitochondrial myopathies, oculopharyngeal muscular dystrophy, myotonic. All these things can lead to doses. And the next thing is the reaction to light. We have two, this thing, direct and indirect reaction to light. How to examine the reaction to light? Reduce illumination, that is, it should not be more illumined, it should be reduced illumination. Vision should be focused on a far object. You see for the far object. Then you bring a torchlight, a beam of torchlight from the side of the eye, not a direct. He is asked to focus on a distant object, far off object. Then bring a beam of light from the side, is shown from the side of the eye. And there will be constriction, this constriction of the pupil. The same thing you repeat on the other side. Close this and repeat this. Again you close this and repeat this. There will be this constriction on the other side. Now we perform an indirect consensual light test. That is indirect. It is a direct light reflex, indirect light reflex. Indirect light reflex, that is you put a shield here, block the hand. There should not be any gap between the hand and the nose bridge. It should be completely sealed. Then you, the same way, you bring light into the from a side from here. And you observe the pupillary reflex here. And there were this constriction. That is the indirect light reflex. Indirect. That is shield one eye. Shield means completely shield one eye, means here. In the bridge you put something, your hand will do, but it should be a tight grip between the hand and the nose bridge. And you put light here and you get this of the reflection. It is an indirect light. And this is due to the crossing of the fibers in the pretectal region of the midbrain. Because the fibers from the both sides of the eyes. Nerve fibers from both sides of the eyes in the visual pathway, they cross in the pretectal area of midbrain. Thereby, even if you show light here, reflexes are carried to the other eye also, and then you get this. Therefore, this is very important. The direct light reflex and indirect light reflex. Direct light reflex is from distant where you used to see. Room should be a little bit dark. From the side, you put a torch. You observe here. And indirect, you close this bridge tightly without any gap, so that light should not pass from here to here. And then you focus your light here and your hand tightly. You observe here. This is due to crossing of the fibers in the pretectal area of the midbrain. Most of them are making the mistake that the optic is wrong. You please remember pretectal area of midbrain, the fibers are crossing, and therefore the signals are being carried to this region also. Now another reflex are concerned with the oculomotor and third cranial nerve is the accommodation. Convergence and accommodation for vision. Accommodation is nothing but focusing a near object, bringing correctly into focus the near object by increasing the anterior diameter of the lens. We bring them to focus the near object correctly on the lens by increasing the anterior diameter of the lens. Near object is focused correctly on the lens by increasing the anterior diameter of the lens. Now, if you see vision on a distant, ask the patient to look at a distant object. The patient is asked to look at a distant object. And suddenly, you bring your finger near to the eyes and ask her to look at the finger in front of the face, that is almost near to the nose. Then again you remove your finger, the far object, and observe pupillary reaction. You have to observe far vision first. You instructed to see the far object. Suddenly you bring your finger to the near, and then again you remove your finger to the far distant, and then observe the pupillary reaction. How accommodation is occurring. The accommodation is nothing but focusing a near object clearly on the lens by increasing the anterior diameter of the lens. And this is brought about by the constriction of the ciliary muscles. Constriction of the ciliary muscles and constriction of the pupillary sphincter by the sphincter constrictor sphincter muscles. The constriction of the pupillary, constriction of the ciliary muscles, the anterior diameter of the lens is increased by constriction of the ciliary muscle. By constriction of the pupil, the sphincter pupillae, the pupil size is constricted and the focus is more on the central part of the lens. The focus occurs more on the central part of the lens when the pupil is directed, and this gives us a clear vision. Therefore, these are two mechanisms: ciliary, pupillary constriction, and ciliary muscle constriction. Ocular movements I have already told you. Still, head should be still. You should not move his head along with the finger. If you move his head, that is not done. Therefore, lateral direction, medial direction, upper direction, lower direction, and the middle rotation, external and internal rotation. See whether the both eyes are normal or whether one eye is lagging behind the other. And you have to observe a nystagmus, squint, and ptosis. These are some of the signs of third nerve palsy. Here, limited adduction. The medially he is not able to bring the eyeball medially. Limited adduction. Middle movement is restricted. Limited deviation. Lateral deviation, limited depression. Depression is also limited. Therefore, this is normal adduction, sequel normal adduction. Here, normal adduction is not like this. Wide gap is there. Then these are the few conditions. Fourth nerve, trochlea. They ask what we do is ask the patient to take them for trochlea now. Turn eye in. Therefore, you asked him to look. Turn eye in. That is the medial side towards the nose, and then try to ask him to look down. Therefore, you ask him to inhale, then ask him to look down. This patient is unable to look, move downwards and laterally. Move downwards and laterally. The first fourth nerve. Fourth nerve. That's the fourth nerve is superior oblique. The movements superior oblique. The superior oblique movements are that is medially deviated eye is unable to depress. Depression is absent in medially deviated eye. If you ask a patient to turn in, that is medially deviated eye, and then look down, medially deviated eye to look down, that is the action of the trochlea nerve. Depression of the medially deviated eye, and that action is not seen here. Depression of medially deviated eye, the eye is not able to deviate, unable to move downward here. The cause may be due to injury. We just remember that trochlea nerve is concerned with depression of medially deviated eye, and this is absent here, and the etiology is trauma, injury. These are some of the signs of fourth nerve palsy. This is signs. Right hyperdeviation, right under deviation, right coraction. All these things are defects. Now sixth nerve, abduction. The fourth is LR6, lateral rectus sixth nerve. Pathological feature now only move laterally. Lateral gaze, and lateral gaze, that is lateral face to the lateral gaze here. Lateral gaze. This is right eye. The affected right eye is adducted. The eyeball is medially placed. It cannot abduct. Therefore, lateral movement is absent here. It cannot abduct lateral movement. Here, it is adducted. It cannot abduct. The right eye is abducted. Left eye is normal. See, left eye is normal. Left eye, right eye. What are the causes? It may be tumor, cerebellopontine angle, cavernous sinus lesions, that is vascular, elevated intracranial pressure due to any cause, metabolic causes, subarachnoid space lesions, that is, it may be hemorrhage due to accidents, infection, inflammation, or tumor. Subarachnoid accidents matter, hemorrhage is more common. Inflammatory, after a viral infection, inflammation may occur. Demyelinating disease, giant cell arthritis. All these things may cause inflammation. Most post-viral inflammations are most common. Elevated intracranial pressures may occur due to any cause. Tumors may occur early. Subarachnoid space lesions, hemorrhage is more common. All these things. Therefore, in sixth nerve is lateral gaze is affected. Lateral gaze affected in sixth nerve. The fourth nerve, depression nerve. Depression in medially deviated eye is affected. Trigeminal nerve. Trigeminal nerve. It is a mixed nerve. Trigeminal nerve is a mixed nerve. The maxillary and ophthalmic parts are sensory, and mandibular part is both sensory and motor mixed. The maxillary and ophthalmic parts are sensory. The mandibular part are both. therefore we test for all these things for trigeminal. Cutaneous sensations. Cutaneous sensations, motor functions mainly this mandibular division. Corneal reflex all in ophthalmic division. Test jaw, that is the mandibular division. Here, it is mainly divided into three parts. Maxillary, the ophthalmic, maxillary, mandibular. Here, ophthalmic, maxillary, and mandibular zone. Mandibular zone. There are three. These two zones, ophthalmic and maxillary zones, are mostly sensory. And mandibular zone, both sensory and motor. And now see what are the regions here. Skull, forehead, upper part of eyelid, upper conjunctiva, eyeball, lacrimal glands, side of nose. These are grooves of nose. All this come under ophthalmic vision. Skull, forehead, upper part of upper eyelid, upper conjunctiva, eyeball, lacrimal glands, side of nose. This is the ophthalmic divisional part. And for maxillary division part, upper lower eyelid, lower conjunctival part, lower eyelid, lower conjunctival part, cheeks, nasal mucosa, cheeks, lower eyelid, lower conjunctiva, cheeks, nasal mucus, upper lip, upper teeth, upper part of pharynx, then upper pharynx, and then we have this palate, soft palate, roof of mouth, soft palate, upper part of pharyngeal, cheek, lower eyelid, lower conjunctiva, upper lip, upper part of it. All this come under maxillary division. And then we come to mandibular division. Lower teeth, lower lips, anterior 2/3 of tongue, not taste. It's just a cutaneous sensations. Anterior 2/3 of tongue, muscles of mastication, masseter and temporalis. Lower lip, lower teeth, muscles of mastication, anterior 2/3 of tongue, ear. All this comes under mandibular part. And before this, we observe for all these things, first the sensory part is cutaneous sensation, touch, pressure, pain, all these things, temperature, all these things, cutaneous sensations we have to test for. For all these three areas, ophthalmic, maxillary, mandibular, cutaneous sensations we have to test first, whether they are present or absent. Now this area. And then the ophthalmic vision, corneal reflex also we test. And then in disease of this is the cutaneous sensations are affected in regions of the ophthalmic division of the trigeminal nerve, cutaneous, all this pressure, temperature, pain, all these things are affected. All these things are affected. And then corneal keratitis is also common. In inflammatory changes occur and the corneal keratitis may occur. And therefore corneal also we have to see corneal reflex and all these things. And then coming to the maxillary, we see for this cutaneous sensation and then also palatal reflex and cutaneous sensation. And for mandibular, we clench his teeth. We ask him to clench his teeth. That is motor part. The vestibular and temporalis, they stand out prominently on both sides. Vestibular and temporalis stand out on both on prominent in a normal case. We ask him to clench his teeth. And then open his mouth. If there is a lesion on the side, that side is pushed forward by the healthy pterygoid muscles. If there is a lesion on one side, the side is pushed by the healthy pterygoid muscles. And for this also we see for cutaneous sensations. Here the cutaneous sensation, sterile sharp item. Something you have to take, a sharp item, sterile, light touch, thermal, pressure, pain. All areas we have to test separately. Ophthalmic area we have to test separately. Maxillary area we have to test separately. Mandibular area we have to test separately. Here, ask the patient to clench his teeth. To see whether clench his teeth and see whether temporalis and vestibular are prominent. Whether there is an equal prominence on both sides. Palpating temporalis, palpating vestibular muscles. And another test I told you, asking to open the mouth, jaw will deviate towards the parallel side because the healthy side muscles, healthy sides external pterygoid muscles push them more laterally. Therefore, the jaw will deviate to the paralyzed side. Therefore, the two motor testing for temporalis and vestibular muscles and opening of the jaw, and the testing for the cutaneous sensation in all the three areas. Corneal reflex for corneal keratitis. Gentle, clean, sterile cotton should be used, otherwise you will be introducing an infection into the eye. Sterile, autoclaved cotton. Sterile cotton is used for corneal and conjunctival reflex because unnecessary infection will be introduced by us. The patient should blame. Observe any corneal keratitis or anything. Jaw jerk is another test you do. The jaw should be kept loose, not tightly fixed. It should be just lightly there. Forefinger should be placed below the lower lip. Hold the patella hammer in the middle. Not very edges, you have to hold it here somewhere here. Lightly you have to tap it on your finger. Ask him to just close his mouth. Not very tightly. Put a finger on the below the lower lip. Put a knee hammer, patella hammer. Hold it a little bit closer here and then tap it. A slight closer will be there. It should be observed carefully. Otherwise, we cannot pinpoint the jerk. You have to observe carefully or do it 1 or 2 times. 2-3 times if you do, you may observe it. Abnormal, this is normal. Slight closer, a little bit closer. It is a normal. But what is abnormal? The reflex will be exaggerated, more clearly seen. It usually happens in motor, upper motor neuron lesions. Upper motor neuron. And some of them are pseudobulbar palsy, multiple sclerosis. In this condition, this is exaggerated. Therefore, you have to do Western temporalis test and ask him to open the mouth and see whether the jaw is being pushed to one side. That is by pterygoid muscles. Another one is the jaw jerk. Trigeminal neuralgia. Sometimes what happens is trigeminal neuralgia, it is also known as epidural, sudden unilateral pain, severe brief stabbing, pain in the distribution one or more branches of the vitreum. Any of the one or the two, whether it may be a pelvic branch or a maxillary branch or mandibular branch. Suddenly the patient complains of it may be unilateral, not both sides, only one side, severe pain. Sometimes in this region, sometimes in this region, and sometimes in this region. Severe, as if it's somebody is picking you with pins and needles, lancinating, recurring pain. Recurring, it means in between it may be not there, and then again. Most common cause is compression. Some arteria or something is compressing that root, no root, some artery, arterial loop or vessel or some artery. Some artery is compressing. Therefore, you have to find out the cause. Some inflammation is causing compression of this. Therefore, this may be the cause. Thick dullness, trigeminal neuralgia. If all three may not be affected, only one area may be affected. Sensory neuropathy, trigeminal neuropathy, that is trigeminal neuralgia, pain, neuropathy. Sensation loss, loss of sensation, cutaneous sensation of that area may occur. Loss of cutaneous sensation, sensation may not be felt in that particular areas. That may also occur. Pain, neuralgia is a pain. Here, loss of cutaneous sensations in that area may occur. A weakness of the jaw muscle. This masseter and temporalis muscles, they are responsible for mastication. Therefore, we feel weakness of the jaw muscles. So, bone weakness. Therefore, sensation may be lost, pain may occur, dolorous pain, a sensation, that cutaneous sensation may be lost in any of the area. Weakness of the masseter and temporalis, which results in weakness of masticating muscles. And this mandibular division disease may sometimes cause ulcers in the mouth, traffic ulcers in the mouth, and decrease in salivary secretions, traffic ulcers in the mouth. The cause of this weakness may be Sjogren's disease, syndrome, herpes zoster, sometimes leprosy. Sensory loss is the most common. Leprosy also. Leprosy, the patient doesn't feel sensations. Nowadays, we don't see much of the case of leprosy. The patient go to subjects and loss of sensation, even if this legs and all, any rats or something else bite, they don't feel the pain of it because sensations are not there. Usually beggars we used to see, lot of beggars nowadays are very less with the leprosy. We see with bandages tied to the legs. Because of loss of sensation, they don't get there. They sleep on pavements and all these things are rats and all other animals. They, even if they bite, they don't feel the sensation. Therefore, they come with the lesions. The leprosy centers have been there. And the leprosy center is there in all areas. And then instant letters come up. Meningioma tumors, sonoma tumors. Okay, this way finish the 1 to 6 cranial laws. These cranial laws are very important because we'll be keeping in the examinations. Second cranial law may be kept separately and one other cranial laws 7 to 12. Tomorrow we are going to be, and this 1 to 6. I hope there's no confusion regarding 1 to 6. First is the olfactory. Each nostril you have to test separately. That don't forget. Close and then test. You close one nostril and then test another nostril. That is the and the pathway may be asked. Olfactory mucosa, you start a neuron, bipolar cells. And from there it goes to the bipolar cells. Then you have the ethmoid. Okay, ఇంకా టైం అవ్వలేదు కదా. Ethmoid bone, and thereby bulb from there, olfactory bulb, from the bulb second order neurons arise. In second order neurons, they go to the pyriform lobe. Okay, thank you.